You know what's funny? You think billionaires wake up stressed about money. They don't. While you're refreshing your bank app for the third time today, they're thinking about something completely different. And that difference? That's literally the gap between you and them. I spent 6 months studying how the top 1% actually operate, not the LinkedIn motivation posts, not the podcast sound bites, the real stuff. Their actual thought patterns, decision-making frameworks, and the mental models they run 24/7. And honestly, it made me uncomfortable, because once you see how they think, you can't unsee it. Here's what nobody tells you. Becoming a billionaire isn't about working harder or having better ideas. It's about rewiring your brain to process reality differently. They're not smarter than you. They're not more talented. They just think in a completely different operating system. And that operating system, it's learnable, but it requires you to admit that everything you believe about money and success might be wrong. So if you're ready to see how the game is actually played, stay with me, because what I'm about to show you will either change everything or make you realize why you'll never make it to the top. Let's go. Before we start, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with your favorite topic you want us to cover next. It actually helps us create content you want to see. Let's start with something that's going to sound weird. Billionaires don't care about money. I know. You're thinking, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But hear me out. When Jeff Bezos checks his net worth and sees it dropped by $3 billion in a day, he doesn't panic. He doesn't call his accountant. He doesn't lose sleep. You know why? Because to him, money stopped being money a long time ago. It became something else entirely. It became a score, a metric, a byproduct of the real game he's playing. And this is where most people get it completely wrong. You think the goal is to make money? They know the goal is to build systems that make money irrelevant. There's a massive difference. When you have $1,000 in your account, money is survival. When you have 10,000, it's security. At 100,000, it's freedom. At 1 million, it's options. But somewhere between 10 million and 100 million, something breaks in your brain. Money stops being the thing you chase and becomes the thing that chases you. The top 1% understand something you do, and poor people make decisions based on their bank account. Rich people make decisions based on their calendar. This isn't just a cute saying. This is the fundamental operating system difference. You're out here asking, can I afford this? They're asking, is this worth my time? You're calculating costs. They're calculating opportunity cost. You're thinking about the next month. They're thinking about the next decade. Let me tell you about a conversation I had with someone who sold their company for $340 million. I asked them what changed after the money hit their account. They said something that stuck with me. I realized I'd been rich for years. I just didn't have the bank account to prove it yet. Here's what they meant. Before the exit, they were already thinking like a billionaire. They structured their day like their time was worth $10,000 an hour. Even when they were making $150,000 a year, they said no to things that didn't compound. They eliminated everything that didn't scale. They built systems while everyone else was doing tasks. The top 1% are obsessed with time in a way that seems almost psychotic to normal people. They don't just manage their calendar. They architect it like an engineer designs a building. Every meeting has a purpose. Every conversation has a return. Every hour has a plan. And here's the uncomfortable part. They will absolutely ghost you without feeling guilty about it. You think they're rude. They think they're strategic. You take it personally. They don't think about you at all. They don't fear losing money. They fear losing time they can never buy back. This is why they'll spend $100,000 on a private jet to save 4 hours. But they'll negotiate for weeks over a $1 billion deal. The time saved is worth more than the money spent. The time invested in the deal is worth more than their hourly rate. Warren Buffett still lives in the same house he bought in 1958 for $31,500, but his private jet, that's named the Indefensible, because he knows it's logically indefensible to spend that much on travel, but he does it anyway, because time. Now let's talk about risk, because this is where things get really different. You and billionaires literally speak different languages when it comes to risk. You think about risk as, what could I lose? They think about risk as, what's the expected value? These are not the same thing. When a normal person looks at an investment opportunity with a 70% chance of doubling their money and a 30% chance of losing everything, they see danger. When a billionaire sees that, they see math. They see expected value. They run the calculation. 0.7 times 2 plus 0.3 times 0 equals 1.4. Positive expected value. They're in. This is why they invest in things that seem absolutely insane to you. Crypto when it was $1. Companies with no revenue. Technologies that don't exist yet. They're not gambling. They're calculating. And they're playing a different game. You're playing checkers with a chess mindset. They're playing 4D chess with a monopoly strategy. Here's a real example. In 2004, Peter Thiel invested $500,000 in a company called Facebook for a 10.2% stake. Everyone thought he was crazy. A social network for college kids. There were already dozens of those. They all failed. But Thiel wasn't betting on social networks. He was betting on network effects, on Mark Zuckerberg's obsession, on the possibility of monopoly. He calculated the expected value, and the upside was so massive that even a 5% chance of success made it worth the risk. That investment is now worth over $1 billion. But here's what you're missing. Thiel made dozens of bets like that. Most of them failed. You only hear about Facebook. But he knew most would fail. He was playing a portfolio game. He was thinking in probabilities, not certainties. The top 1% are comfortable with failure in a way that's almost alien to normal people. They don't see failure as a character flaw. They see it as data. They don't avoid risk. They calculate it, price it, and take it when the math works. And this is why they get richer while you stay stuck. You're trying to avoid loss. They're trying to maximize expected value. You're playing defense. They're playing offense. You want to be right. They want to be rich. Let's talk about something that's going to make you uncomfortable. How billionaires think about relationships. You think networking is about meeting people and being friendly. They think networking is about building monopolies on human capital. These are very different games. When you meet someone, you think, could this person help me? When they meet someone, they think, could this person give me access to a network I don't have? You're thinking 1 level deep. They're thinking 3 levels deep. You network to get opportunities. They network to create monopolies. Here's how it actually works. The top 1% don't network horizontally. They network vertically. They don't want to know 1,000 people at their level. They want to know 10 people who control access to 100,000 people at their level. They're building what they call a value stack. Every relationship has to add something unique to the stack. Access to capital, access to distribution, access to talent, access to information. If you don't add to the stack, you don't stay in the network. This sounds cold, right? It is, but it's also honest. And here's what is interesting. The relationships they build this way often become deeper and more meaningful than normal friendships. Because they're built on mutual value creation, not just shared interests or proximity. Elon Musk doesn't have friends in the traditional sense. He has co-conspirators. People who are building the future with him. People who share his level of obsession. People who operate at his speed. Everyone else gets filtered out, not because he's mean, but because there's no bandwidth for relationships that don't compound. And here's the thing that'll really mess with your head. They're comfortable being misunderstood. Actually, they expect it. They know that the decisions they make won't make sense to 99% of people, and they're fine with that. They'd rather be right and lonely than wrong and popular. Now let's talk about something nobody wants to admit. Being rich doesn't make you less stressed about money. It makes you more stressed. Just in a different way. When you have nothing, you stress about survival. When you have a little, you stress about security. When you have a lot, you stress about preservation. And when you have everything, you stress about meaning. This is the scarcity paradox. The more you have, the more you realize how fragile it all is. One bad decision, one economic collapse, one revolution, one regulatory change. Everything could disappear. The top 1% understand something that poor people do, and wealth is harder to keep than it is to make. Making your first million requires hustle and luck. Making your first 100 million requires strategy and timing. Keeping a billion requires paranoia. This is why they diversify obsessively. Why they have money in different countries, different currencies, different asset classes. Why they buy land, gold, art, companies, crypto, bonds, stocks. They're not being greedy. They're being terrified. The difference between millions and billions. One extra zero and zero emotional attachment. Because at a certain level of wealth, money stops being emotional and becomes purely logical. They don't celebrate wins. They don't mourn losses. They just adjust the strategy and keep playing. But here's what keeps them up at night. Not losing money, losing relevance, becoming obsolete, missing the next wave, being disrupted, getting old, running out of time to build what they want to build. The top 1% are the most insecure people on the planet. They just hide it better than you do. They channel that insecurity into building, creating, and competing. While you're trying to feel secure, they've accepted that security is an illusion and replaced it with momentum. Let's talk about how billionaires think about death and meaning, because this is where it gets philosophical. You're trying to make enough money to retire. They're trying to build things that outlive them. You're thinking about your lifetime. They're thinking about the next century. While you're optimizing your life, they're architecting their legacy. When Elon Musk talks about going to Mars, he's not talking about doing it in his lifetime. He knows he probably won't live to see 1 million people on Mars, but he's building toward it anyway. When Jeff Bezos talks about his space company, Blue Origin, he says his most important work is that one. Not Amazon, the company that might enable humanity to become a spacefaring civilization. This is legacy thinking. It's not about them. It's about what comes after them. Carnegie spent the first half of his life building steel and the second half giving away libraries. Rockefeller created the modern oil industry and then spent his fortune on medical research that saved millions of lives. Gates built Microsoft and now is working to eradicate diseases. They all made their money by being ruthless competitors. And then they spent their money trying to solve problems they'd never see solved. Here's the pattern. Make money through capitalism. Spend it on problems capitalism can't solve. Build wealth through competition. Spend it on cooperation. Win the game, then change the rules. The top 1% think about legacy in 3 layers. First layer, financial wealth that can be passed down. Second layer, companies and systems that continue generating value. Third layer, ideas and changes that reshape how humanity functions. Most people never get past layer 1. The top 1% are obsessed with layer 3. And here's what's wild. The stuff they're building for layer 3, they know they'll never see it finished. They know they'll die before it matters, and they're building it anyway. Because at a certain level of wealth and achievement, all you have to do is make a dent in the universe. To build something so big that history remembers it. To solve problems so complex that solving them changes everything. So let's get to the uncomfortable part. The thing nobody wants to say out loud. You can learn all of this. You can adopt these mental models. You can start thinking like a billionaire today, but it won't make you a billionaire. And here's why. The top 1% didn't just think differently. They acted differently when everyone told them they were wrong. They took risks that seemed insane. They worked when normal people rested. They said no to comfort. They said no to security. They said no to what everyone else said yes to. And most importantly, they got lucky, not random luck, but luck that they positioned themselves to catch. They were in the right place because they put themselves there. They met the right people because they built the right networks. They saw the right opportunities because they trained themselves to see them. The difference between you and them isn't intelligence. It's not work ethic. It's not even opportunity. It's the willingness to be uncomfortable for a very long time. The willingness to be misunderstood. The willingness to bet everything on a belief that nobody else shares. The willingness to look stupid, be wrong, fail publicly, and keep going anyway. Most people aren't willing to do that, and that's fine. That's actually normal. The top 1% aren't normal. They're outliers. They're the weird ones, the obsessed ones, the ones who can't turn it off even when they want to. So here's the real question. Knowing all of this, what are you going to do? Are you going to keep thinking the way you've always thought and hope for different results? Or are you going to start thinking like the top 1% and see what happens? Because the frameworks are here. The mental models are here. The strategies are here. The only thing missing is you making the decision to actually use them. And that decision, that's the one thing I can't make for you. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that watching this video is going to make you rich. It won't. Information without action is just entertainment. And most of you will watch this, feel inspired for about 30 minutes, and then go right back to thinking exactly the way you thought before. That's not judgment. That's just reality. But for the small percentage of you who are actually different, who actually want to change, who are willing to be uncomfortable, this is your starting point. Not your finish line, your starting point. The billionaires I studied, they didn't get there by watching videos. They got there by taking what they learned and testing it in the real world, by failing, by adjusting, by trying again, by being obsessed when everyone else got bored. So here's what I want you to do. Don't just consume this, use it. Pick one framework from this video. Just one. The time architecture, the risk calculation, the relationship economy, whatever resonated with you. And actually implement it this week, not next month, not when you feel ready. This week. Because the difference between the top 1% and everyone else isn't knowledge, it's execution speed. While you're planning, they're doing. While you're getting ready, they're already 3 steps ahead. And if this video hit different for you, if it made you think about money and success in a new way, then hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started. This channel is about pulling back the curtain on how the top 1% actually operate. No fluff, no motivation, just the real playbook. And drop a comment right now with your favorite topic you want us to cover next. What do you want to understand about the 1%? How they invest, how they hire, how they think about relationships, how they build companies. Tell me and I'll research it and break it down for you. The top 1% aren't superhumans. They're just humans who think differently and act accordingly. And now you know how they think. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? I'll see you in the next one.